And welcome back. Last time we saw how to add the second player in our game. It was just the visual part for the graphic. This time we continue with the code. So we go on the event sheet here, and then we're going to delete all the manipulation function, the manipulation for the array, because we need to try to save a little bit of space on our code in case you have the free version construct 2 or 3, and you have a limited events that you can have. So I'll try to make it as small as possible. So I select all the function from resize to sort, and then going to delete all of them. If you need them, you can check the previous videos, and if you need in the future in our game, we can still recreate only the one that we need. To continue, we go to search for all the disabled line of codes, and then we delete them as well, because we saw the game is working fine until now, so we don't need any more. At the moment we try to make a little bit clear, and at the same time we make a little bit of space. So we select everything we don't need and we get rid of them. Okay, now that we have done all this, we are going to close all these functions and go to the actions, and we leave it open only start layout. First of all, we are going to create a new array for the second player, because we need to have a separate array to handle the cards for the second player. We could use the same array here and change it from monodimensional to bidimensional array, so I have like 2 columns, one for each player for the list of the cards. But it will make a little bit more complicated the situation in case the size of the deck will change. So let's say one player has suddenly 12 cards, another player has 10 cards. The array still need to have 12 elements here of the width, even if one player has only 10 elements. So we will need to change something like, for example, give like -1 to the value of the card, just to pretend that it is empty, the array, but it will be overcomplicating things. So the best solution, the easy one, is to have a second array. So separate array for each player, and it's more clear and less event that we need to run to make check on the arrays. Now the problem is that with the free version of construct 2, you cannot create families. So with families will be good, because you can just recycle the code and call in the family everything that is called for the family. The family will include, for example, in this case, our array. So one family put array for the player 1, array for the player 2, and any reference to the family, let's say family array, if the name, will be then filtered by depending on the variable that we can give to the array instance variable to identify, like we did with these ones. We create all the, I need to unlock. We create all instance variables for all the slot of the card, the deck, the text for the player to identify which one is which. Still at the moment it's at 0, but we're going to fill them as soup. So in that case, having a family will be easier to manage all the things, but we can't do it with a free version. So another thing you could try to do as well is just to make a new instance of this array. But as you can see, you cannot drag and drop. So you need to have a separate array. The problem is having separate array, you cannot mesh them together if they are not under the same family. So our trick here we're going to use today is to create a new array deck, but we do inside the events. Inside the start of layout, we create a new object with system, and then we say we create array deck. So it will be the same array deck that is here, just a copy, a clone. So normally I cannot do it here on the layout, but I can do it by code. So there is like a workaround. The only thing I need to add, as usual, the same instance variable to identify them, player number. By default, I leave a player number 1. In this way, the array deck that is created already in the game, when the game starts, is the array that we use for player number 1. This one where we create in the start layout event will be the one for the player 2. Now, as we saw in the past, the construct 2 is filtering the action from the event, but also inside the action as well. When you create something, you can sort of filter the object itself. So if I'm creating this array here, I'm doing anything for the array inside this group is related to this array deck here. So if I'm going to open array deck here and then set the values for the player number, the instance variable to 2, and I'll put this under here. And now when I create this array, it will be player number 2 array. So I have now 2 separate arrays that I can then identify thanks to this player number instance variable. So any reference I will do now to array deck will be filtered thanks to this instance variable. Another thing I need to add here is that I copy this weight here before we create the first deck. This because I give the time to the system to allocate a space in the memory for this array, because otherwise it will be a little bit more time than do a tick in the game. So just to give a little bit of time to organize, otherwise any reference might not work. Okay, at this stage I create also a global variable and I will call it turn. So this will be a numeric variable. Initial value is 1, and then description will be player's turn. That can be 1 or 2. So we know that this variable can be 1 or 2. Doesn't really matter if we start with 1, but just to give it one value, it could be any number. Doesn't matter because at the inside still start of the layout here, we are going to use the same instruction we used in the past inside the 8-bit shooter game tutorial, if you remember, these shoes. Okay, with these instructions we give the computer the option to give a value between, that is 1 or 2, to the variable turn, and we place this one on the array deck here. Okay, so at the beginning of the game we create a copy of the array deck, we give it an instance variable number 2, and then we say to the variable turn to have a value that is 1 or 2. And in this case we know already that which player will play, might be at the beginning of the game player number 1 or player number 2. So we go back to our layout here. As we said the other day, we create this player number instance variable, and we give for this one on the left all the values to 1, because it will be for player number 1, and this one 2 for player number 2. I could use rather than 1 and 2, 0, 1, but I don't want to confuse you too much, so I will make it this way to make it easier to understand when we talk about any reference in the future. Save of course every now and then. Okay, at this point, as our last action for on start of layout group, we say that the icon here that we use to identify which player is the next player, we set the frame of the animation to turn -1. Turn -1 because turn can be 1 or 2 for player 1 or 2, but the frame of the animation starts to be counted from 0, so 0 or 1. So if the player is number 1, 1 minus 1 is the animation number 0. If it's player 2, 2 minus 1, animation number 1 for the second player. Okay, and this is done. Now, all this block here, as I said before, is related to the first player, because we did it last time, related to the first player, but now we have the second player, and we can use families to identify the array. So the only way for us to identify is to reference to the array with the player number, And the best thing for us to do within the limit of the free version of construct is to add a new event and filter everything that is related to this call to function, all these actions. So first of all, I'm going to say that this one is true if the array deck compare instance variable player number is equal to turn. So basically, if we are referring to the array that has the same instance variable equals to turn, so the player 1 in this case, if it's the start with player 1, or player 2 in the case it's the turn of the player 2. Another thing to add to filter, we don't want to filter only the array but also the deck. So add another condition. We do the same thing. Compare instance variable. Player number has to be equals to turn. And then another condition again. And this time we filter the slots because all the action has to be related to the slot of the current player. And again, turn in player number. Okay, now all these things here are filtering the player. And we put all these conditions, so basically everything that is not on starter layout, inside here. Okay, now everything, as I said before, is filtered by this. So if I click, for example, on the deck here, it works only if the deck is the one corresponding to the turn, and so on for all the other stuff. Now inside the shuffle deck, we are going to add a new condition that is here, because we are filtering the array, the deck, the slot, but we are not filtering the text in this group here. So I want to filter the text in this case, and I add another condition and do the same thing. Text compare instance variable equals to player number. Okay, turn. So player number has to be equals to turn as usual. So for this one, shuffle deck is done. So I can close this. Then we go inside the create deck. Here in the second loop here, I need to change these spawner cards because I did wrong last time. I want to spawn the cards on the cards layer, of course, not on the board, because we create a separate layer for that reason. And I'm going to add another action, cards, set value of player number to turn, because otherwise when we create the cards, the value of player number is 0, and then we cannot refer anymore to these cards properly. So that's why we are doing this in creation phase. We can close now create deck. Inside the show array, we add a second condition. So this shuffling here, it's happening only if the instance variable, the text, is equals or turn. The instance variable of course always player number, because now we refer always to this one. So I can add here another condition and then do the same filtering. I can copy from here, whatever it's easier for you. Same thing. And I put first here. So first I'm going to filter the text according to what we need, and then we go to do this loop. Okay, this was for show array. Now we need to create a new function that it will be outside of this block here, and then we call the function pass turn. Now when I pass turn, I want that the variable turn changes, and I set value to 3 minus turn. Okay, can you guess why I'm doing 3 minus turn? I will give you in 1 second the solution. Now I disable this one here. Now to pass the turn, normally what you will do, you will be something like this. You compare the variable turn if the turn is equal 1. So if this is the turn of player number 1 and then you want to pass the turn, you say that set value of the variable turn to 2. So if it's player 1 number 1, now we want to go to player 2. When we pass turn, we do this. Or otherwise, what else? So otherwise, if the turn is equals to 2, we change it to turn 1. So I have 1, 2, 3 lines to do this change your turn. But if I do this, I can do everything in one line, getting rid of this. And I get rid of this because if the player turn is 1, so with this function I will get back 3 with this calculation, because 3 minus 1, I get 2. So if instead is the turn of the second player, the variable turn is 2. So if I make 3 minus 2, the turns become 1. So we've done everything in just one line. So keep in mind this, because in the future it might be very useful for you to save space, especially once again if you have the free version construct, you try to save as much line as possible. Again, we go to save our game, and in addition to this one, we are going to change the animation of end turn. Frame set frame equals to turn minus 1, as we did here. Same. So I'm not going to explain, we already said before. Now I go inside this block here where I have a drag and drop. I open, and here where I have the check between slot number and the card slot, I'm going to call the new function pass turn. Okay, so after I do this, basically in the game, after we drag the card on the use, and we use the card. In this, of course, the game is not ready yet, so this is in theory for now. We want that's the last thing we can do, so we pass the turn. So in our case, after dropping the card here, we do all the things we say before. We destroy the card, and at the end we call the function here to pass the turn. Okay, now we need to create a new variable, global variable, and we call it first turn, and we give initial value to 1. So 0 means no, 1 equals to yes. So if it's the first turn, the variable is 1. If it's not the first turn of the game, the variable becomes 0. I could use a Boolean variable, but I prefer to use numerical variable because sometimes you want to do something in addition to the first turn, so maybe before the turn, so you want to have a value that is 2, 1 or 0. So to have a little bit of flexibility, I prefer to do in this way, just in case for the future. Okay, so now that we have this first turn variable inside let's close it again. Inside pass turn, we make a sub event, and we check if it's the first turn when we pass the turn. Compare variable. If first turn is equal to 1, what we do? So at the moment we have only the cards for the first player, so maybe I show you directly. Just let me drag here. Okay, so this is what's happening. We have one player, he creates the first deck, then we use the card, we pass the turn, but the second player can't do anything because it doesn't have a deck yet. So we want to create a deck for the second player. That's why we have this. So after the first time, because in our game we want that the first player has the advantage to start first, of course. It does an action, but it doesn't know the cards that the second player has, because I remember this game is local multiplayer, so your friend will be sitting next to you, play against you, so each one can see the card of the other player. So in our case, to make it a little bit fair, the second player, since he starts after the first one, that has advantage to start first, will create his deck later and then show his cards later. So the first player cannot have a proper strategy because doesn't know what's coming after. So go back to the game. We know that when the first player passes the turn, that is the first time. Then we have this check to know that it's the first turn. Then we give to the second player the deck. So we call the function create deck. Okay, and at this stage we also say that first turn becomes 0, because now that every player had their own first turn, because from now on the second player will have the first turn because creating the deck. We don't want that this happen again, because otherwise it will keep creating deck, and we don't want this happening. Okay, so we close this, we go inside our block, and when we pick the card, we add together with this check card slot. I remember this one, if you have a problem with space for the limit of your events, you can put everything together. For now, I'll leave it open to make it a little clear. Add another event here. If we want to filter this action as usual for player number related to the turn, to the variable turn, and we do first of all. So when we pick a card, this will happen only for the cards related to the player that actually has the control in this turn. Okay, so we pick the card, so we can close this, and we go now inside the double click with the mouse on the deck. We pick the card from the deck when we double click, or we created the deck. This was our first iteration, first test. So now we don't need anymore this one here, because we have already created 2 decks. In our game we don't want to keep creating decks, and we delete this. Okay, at this point this is done. I want just to fix one thing here on our text, because it's a little bit small, so I just change the font size to something a little bit bigger, maybe 20 could be okay. Yeah, seems fine. Okay, and then we can test our game. Bring it inside the window. Okay, so you can see player 1 is created. I use. Player 2 is created his deck, and then we use it, and then we keep doing the creation of the cards every time we pass the turn. Everything works fine. As you can see, cards doesn't go anywhere that is not supposed to go, so only in the news, and we keep. Sorry, I rushed a little bit, try to finish quickly because this video is a little bit long, so just to give a confirmation that everything is working fine. Of course we did all the possible things, but there might be still some little things to adjust, but we'll see later on. As you can see, I can't create the deck anymore here. This one I can take all the cards, it doesn't create any deck, not even when I pass the turn. So I think everything works fine. So that's it for now. Next time we're going to see the result of the poll you voted for, choose the team of this game. And if you like the video, as usual, like, subscribe, share, whatever, everything. I'm not going to repeat it in details, you know already. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.